The line curled along the marble hallway like a held breath. Fluorescent lights hummed. A security guard's radio crackled, then went quiet again. Aisha Turner shifted her weight, folder pressed flat against her chest, fingers damp with sweat. The seal on the office door read Municipal Housing Authority. The seal looked official, unquestionable, permanent. Inside, a man in a gray suit skimmed her paperwork without lifting his eyes. His pen paused. He sighed, small, practiced. "I'm sorry," he said, finally looking up, smile thin as glass. "We don't have units that fit your profile." Aisha blinked. "My profile?" He slid the folder back across the desk, careful not to touch her hand. "It's policy." Behind him, a poster promised fair access for all. The word all gleamed, bright and unafraid. Aisha heard her pulse in her ears. She pictured her mother's kitchen table, the eviction notice folded into a square so neat it looked harmless. "What policy?" she asked. The man's jaw tightened. He leaned closer, voice dropping to a tone meant to end things. "You should try somewhere more appropriate." The room went quiet. Too quiet. Aisha felt something settle in her chest. Not fear, not anger, but a cold clarity. She glanced at the blinking red light on her phone, half hidden beneath the folder. She hadn't meant to record. It had started by accident. He stood, already reaching for the door. "Next." As Aisha rose, a woman at the far end of the hall lifted her head, eyes wide, as if she'd heard everything. The red light kept blinking. And then the guard stepped forward and said softly, "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to turn that off." The hallway smelled like disinfectant and old paper, a clean kind of stale that suggested order without comfort. Aisha Turner stood between a man clutching blueprints and a woman rocking a stroller with one squeaking wheel. Everyone avoided eye contact. The digital board chimed and flashed her number. Aisha exhaled and followed the arrow. Inside the office, the air felt thinner. The desk was bare except for a monitor, a pen cup, and a framed certificate announcing compliance with federal standards. The man behind the desk wore a gray suit that fit like it had never been slept in. His nameplate read D. Caldwell. He did not offer his hand. "Miss Turner," he said, eyes already on the folder. "Have a seat." Aisha sat. The chair legs scraped. She placed her folder down, squared. "Thank you for seeing me." Caldwell nodded without looking up. Papers slid. Keys tapped. The clock on the wall clicked, loud enough to count seconds if you needed to. Aisha's phone vibrated in her coat pocket. She ignored it. "I see you've submitted all required documentation," Caldwell said. "Income verification. References. Employment letter." "Yes," Aisha said. "And the pre-approval notice." He hummed. His pen paused. "Unfortunately, we don't have units that fit your profile at this time." Aisha frowned. "My profile?" He finally met her eyes. The smile came then, brief and professional. "Household composition. Location preferences. Risk assessment." Risk. The word felt heavier than it should have. Caldwell leaned back, folding his hands. "It's policy." Aisha glanced at the poster on the wall. Fair access for all, and felt a heat behind her eyes she refused to show. "Can you show me the policy?" He sighed, a sound practiced to signal limits. "Ms. Turner, I'm explaining the outcome, not debating it." "I'm asking for clarity," she said. Her voice stayed even. She was proud of that. "I qualify." Caldwell stood, smoothing his jacket. "You should try somewhere more appropriate." The sentence landed cleanly like a stamp. Aisha felt the room narrow. She stood as well, fingers tightening around the folder. "Appropriate how?" His jaw flexed. "We're done here." The door opened behind her. A security guard appeared, polite, unhurried. "Everything okay?" Caldwell smiled at him. "Yes. We're finished." Aisha turned toward the hallway. As she stepped out, she noticed a woman seated nearby. Mid-40s, clipboard on her lap, watching with an expression that looked like recognition. Aisha's phone buzzed again. She slipped it into her hand, saw the red light blinking and felt her stomach drop. The guard's voice softened. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to turn that off." Aisha looked at the light, then at the guard. "Turn what off?" He nodded toward her phone. "Recording." She hadn't meant to. She hadn't planned it. The truth of that didn't matter. What mattered was that the words were there, preserved, unpolished. Caldwell stood in the doorway now, smile gone. Aisha slid the phone into her pocket. "It's off." The guard studied her a moment, then stepped aside. "Have a good day." She walked down the hall, heart loud, the disinfectant smell turning sharp. Outside, sunlight hit her face like a question she couldn't ignore. She paused on the steps, hand trembling, and pressed play. "It's policy," Caldwell's voice said, calm and certain. Aisha closed her eyes. The apartment was quiet in a way that felt deliberate, like it was holding its breath with them. The refrigerator hummed. Bus sighed somewhere outside. Aisha set her keys in the bowl by the door and stood there, coat still on, listening to the echo of the hallway replay in her head. Her mother, Lorna Turner, sat at the kitchen table with a mug she hadn't touched. The eviction notice lay folded beside her, squared so neatly it looked like a recipe card. Lorna looked up, searching Aisha's face before she asked anything. "Well," Lorna said. Aisha hung her coat. She took a chair across from her mother and set her phone on the table, face down. "They said no." Lorna's shoulders slumped an inch. "No how?" Aisha flipped the phone over. The red light was gone, but the memory of it still blinked. "They said it was policy." Lorna laughed once, a short sound without humor. "Everything is policy when they don't want to say why." Aisha pressed play. Caldwell's voice filled the kitchen, clean and unbothered. "We don't have units that fit your profile. Oz. It's policy." Then softer, sharper. "You should try somewhere more appropriate." Lorna stared at the phone as if it might apologize. When the recording ended, the refrigerator seemed louder. "Appropriate," Lorna said, tasting the word. "Like we're out of season." Aisha swallowed. There was a woman in the hall. I think she heard it. "Did anyone stop him?" Lorna asked. "No." Lorna reached for the mug then stopped. "They never do." Aisha leaned back, staring at the ceiling stain shaped like a cloud she'd never fixed. "I didn't mean to record. It just started." Lorna met her eyes. "Baby, intention doesn't erase truth." The phone buzzed. A text from Jules lit the screen. "How'd it go?" Jules had a way of checking in without crowding. Aisha typed, erased, typed again. They denied it. "Have a recording." 3 dots appeared, vanished, then reappeared. "Be careful," Jules wrote. "That kind of thing has a way of turning on you." Aisha read it twice. "Everyone says be careful," she murmured. "Because they want you quiet," Lorna said. "Quiet people are easy." Aisha opened her laptop and searched the housing authorities site. The language bloomed: risk assessment, household fit, location preference. None of it named anything. All of it sounded reasonable. She clicked through a PDF that promised fairness, then another that described appeals as if they were favors. Aisha scrolled faster. "There's a complaint process." Lorna snorted. "There always is. It says responses within 30 to 60 business days." Aisha did the math in her head. The eviction clock ticked louder. The phone buzzed again. This time Evan, a co-worker from the clinic. "Saw your note. Everything okay?" Aisha pictured his careful smile, the way he lowered his voice around supervisors. She typed back, "Not really. Might need time off." Evan replied almost immediately. "Char will want details." Aisha closed her eyes. They always want details when it costs them nothing. Lorna pushed the folded notice toward her. "We don't have 30 days. Aisha nodded. "I know." She opened a new tab and typed the city's name with the word denial. The result surprised her. Blog post. A short local op-ed. Comments threaded with the same phrases she'd heard. Policy, fit, appropriate. She clicked one and read a story that felt familiar enough to ache. "Mom," Aisha said softly. This isn't just us. Lorna studied her. It never is. The kettle whistled. Lorna stood, poured water she didn't need, then sat again. What are you thinking? Aisha looked at the phone. I'm thinking about filing a complaint. And the recording. I don't know. Lorna reached across the table, covering Aisha's hand. You know what happens when you make noise. Aisha thought of the guard's voice, polite as a warning wrapped in velvet. She thought of the woman with the clipboard. She thought of the poster that promised all without flinching. I also know what happens when you don't. The phone buzzed again. An email notification. Unknown sender. The subject line read, Heard you had a rough appointment. Aisha's breath caught. She opened it. If you're willing to talk, I'm listening, the message said. MK. Mom, Aisha whispered. Lorna leaned in. What is it? A reporter, Aisha said. The word felt heavier than fear. Felt like a door. Sighed, the bus sighed again. The refrigerator hummed. The apartment held its breath. Aisha stared at the email, then at the eviction notice, then back at the phone with Caldwell's voice still living inside it. She didn't answer yet. She just let the quiet stretch, long enough to feel how thin it really was. When she finally closed the laptop, the decision wasn't loud. It was steady. Okay, Aisha said. Let's talk. The complaint portal opened with a polite welcome and a progress bar that promised simplicity. Aisha stared at the first question. Please describe your concern, and felt the weight of translation settle on her shoulders. She typed, deleted, typed again. Words wanted to sharpen. The form preferred them smooth. She chose neutral language. Denied housing without clear explanation. She attached documents. She hovered over the recording upload box, then clicked Add File. The bar crawled forward, inch by inch, as if reluctant. A confirmation screen appeared. Your complaint has been received. No name. No phone number. Just a case ID and a reminder to allow 30 to 60 business days. Aisha exhaled and closed the laptop. The phone rang 5 minutes later. Miss Turner, a woman said, voice warm, almost cheerful. This is Patricia Lowell from the Municipal Housing Authority. I'm calling to follow up on your submission. Aisha sat up. That was fast. We prioritize concerns like yours, Lowell said. I wanted to clarify a few things to ensure accuracy. Aisha glanced at the time. She pressed record on purpose this time. Go ahead. There seems to be a misunderstanding, Lowell continued. Our decisions are based on objective criteria. There is no discrimination. I didn't use that word, Aisha said. Lowell laughed lightly. Of course. But language matters. We wouldn't want this to escalate unnecessarily. Escalate how? By involving parties who may misinterpret context. Aisha pictured Caldwell's smile thinning. I included a recording. Yes, Lowell said, softer now. We received it. And we have concerns about how it was obtained. Aisha's jaw tightened. It was my meeting. Lowell cleared her throat. We advise caution when sharing materials that could violate policy. Policy again, Aisha said. Ms. Turner, Lowell replied, warmth cooling. We're trying to help. After the call ended, Aisha sat still, listening to the echo of help hang in the air like a condition. Her phone buzzed with a new message from Jules. You talked to anyone yet? They called. Aisha typed. They're worried about the recording. Jules replied with a single word. Figures. That afternoon, Aisha met Maya Klein at a cafe near the courthouse. Maya wore a coat too thin for the weather and carried a notebook softened at the edges. She ordered tea and didn't open the notebook right away. Start wherever you want, Maya said. Aisha told it straight. The hallway. The words. The recording. Maya nodded, eyes steady, asking only for dates, names, details that could be checked. Have they contacted you since? Maya asked. Yes, Aisha said. They warned me about escalation. Maya smiled without humor. That's a script. What happens now? Aisha asked. If you're willing, Maya said, finally opening the notebook. I verify. I request comment. I look for patterns. Patterns, Aisha repeated. Maya nodded. Single incidents are easy to dismiss. Patterns are harder. Outside, a siren wailed and faded. Inside, the cafe buzzed with low conversation. Aisha thought of her mother counting days on a calendar. That evening, a letter arrived by email, letterhead crisp and official. We regret to inform you that your complaint lacks sufficient evidence to proceed at this time. The recording was mentioned only as inconclusive. Lorna read it twice. They didn't even try. They did, Aisha said. They tried to stop it. The next day at work, HR called her in. The room smelled like lemon cleaner. Dana, the HR manager, folded her hands. We've received inquiries, she said. Media-related. Aisha nodded. I answered questions on my own time. Dana smiled tightly. We support your right to speak, but please remember our code of conduct. Which part? Aisha asked. Dana hesitated. Professionalism. Aisha left with a pamphlet and a warning that wasn't written down. That night, Maya texted. I found 2 similar denials. Same language. Same office. Aisha's chest tightened. Do they want to talk? One does, Maya replied. Off the record. Aisha played the recording again, alone this time. Caldwell's voice sounded smaller now, stripped of the room that had protected it. She imagined it placed beside other voices, the same phrases stacking into something undeniable. The phone rang again. A blocked number. Miss Turner, Lowell said, no warmth left. We hear you've been speaking to the press. Aisha didn't deny it. I have. This complicates things. For who? Aisha asked. Lowell sighed. For everyone. Aisha ended the call and stared at the wall, heart pounding. The apartment felt smaller. The quiet felt thinner. Her phone buzzed. Maya again. They've agreed to comment tomorrow. Aisha closed her eyes. Tomorrow sounded close. Tomorrow sounded dangerous. Tomorrow sounded like truth stepping into light. She pressed the phone to her chest and whispered, Okay. Outside, the city kept moving, indifferent and loud. Inside, Aisha felt the channels narrowing, funneling everything toward a point that could no longer be avoided. The story went live at 6:02 a.m., tucked between a weather alert and a zoning update, as if it were ordinary. Aisha saw it on her phone before she'd finished brushing her teeth. The headline was careful, almost modest. Housing denial raises questions about policy at municipal office. Her name appeared in the second paragraph. She sat on the edge of the tub and read it twice. Maya had done what she promised. Dates, names, quotes set against public records. The recording wasn't embedded. Its words were transcribed instead. Stripped of tone but sharp all the same. You should try somewhere more appropriate. By 6:17 the comments began. Some thanked her for speaking. Others asked what she'd left out. A few circled the same words like they were clues to a puzzle that refused to solve itself. Policy isn't racism. Maybe there were no units. Why record? Lorna read over her shoulder. They always ask why you documented, she said. Never why it happened. At 7:03, a notification popped up from the Municipal Housing Authority's account. A statement. Aisha clicked. We take all concerns seriously. Our agency does not discriminate and follows established policy to ensure fair access for all residents. We cannot comment on ongoing matters. They said nothing, Aisha said. They said enough, Lorna replied. By mid-morning, Maya called. Local radio wants you, she said. 10 minutes. Live. Aisha looked at the clock, then at her work badge on the counter. I'm supposed to be at the clinic. HR already knows, Maya said gently. They asked for comment. Aisha laughed, a thin sound. Of course they did. She agreed to the interview. The host's voice was smooth, curious without warmth. Ms. Turner, he said. Some listeners are asking why you didn't pursue internal remedies before going public. I did, Aisha said. They called me 5 minutes after I filed. And what did they say? That we should be careful, Aisha replied. She paused, then added, we are always told to be careful. The phones lit up after that. A former neighbor messaged with a story. Stranger sent thanks. Someone else sent a warning wrapped in advice. This won't end well. At noon, Aisha's supervisor called. We're putting you on administrative leave, Marissa said. Just until things settle. Is this disciplinary? Aisha asked. No, Marissa said quickly. Protective. For who? Aisha asked. Marissa didn't answer. The housing authority held a brief press availability at 3. Caldwell stood behind a podium, jaw set, flanked by Lowell. He denied wrongdoing with the ease of rehearsal. Words can be taken out of context, he said. Our policies are designed to serve the community. Aisha watched from her couch. The camera cut to the audience. She saw the woman with the clipboard, the bystander from the hall, sitting in the back row, lips pressed together. Maya texted, she reached out. Says she heard everything. Aisha's heart kicked. Will she go on record? She's thinking, Maya replied. That evening, the longer version of the story dropped. 2 more cases. Same phrases. Same office. A chart showing denial rates by neighborhood that refused to be coincidence. The comments shifted. Still the backlash came. A man on TV shook his head. This is a misunderstanding being blown out of proportion. Aisha's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Stop lying. She deleted it. Another followed. Policy isn't personal. Lorna took the phone from her. You don't need to read those. I need to know what they're saying, Aisha said. Lorna shook her head. They want you tired. That night, Aisha couldn't sleep. She lay on the couch, news murmuring from the TV. Her name scrolling beneath talking heads. She thought of the guard's soft voice. She thought of Lowell's warnings. She thought of the woman in the audience, silent but present. Her phone rang after midnight. Maya's name lit the screen. She'll talk, Maya said. On the record. Aisha sat up. When? Tomorrow morning. Aisha closed her eyes. Tomorrow again. Closer now. Harper. Before dawn, the housing authority released another statement. Longer, firmer. It criticized unauthorized recordings and warned against mischaracterizations that erode trust. Lorna read it aloud. They're blaming your ears. Aisha watched the sun creep through the blinds. Her phone buzzed. An email from HR, subject line next steps. Another from the clinic's board. Another from Maya with a draft question list. She breathed in, then out. The apartment felt too small for what was happening. She pressed play on the recording one more time, letting Caldwell's certainty fill the room. Outside, a siren wailed and cut off. Aisha set the phone down and reached for her jacket. If they're going to talk, she said, voice steady. So am I. She opened the door and stepped into the morning, unaware of who would fall first, only that the quiet was gone for good. The first thing Aisha lost was sleep. It slipped away in pieces, an hour here, a half hour there, until the nights became a long, shallow vigil broken by notifications and the soft creak of the building settling. When she did sleep, she dreamed of hallways that never ended, doors labeled policy that wouldn't open. The second thing she lost was privacy. A man with a camera waited across the street one morning, pretending to film the sky. A neighbor asked too casually if everything on the news was true. At the grocery store, a woman leaned close and whispered, "Good for you," while another shook her head and muttered something about troublemakers. At the clinic, Aisha's access badge stopped working. Marissa met her at the door, eyes apologetic. "Administrative leave," she repeated. "For now." "For how long?" Aisha asked. Marissa glanced at the lobby, then back. "Until this passes." Aisha almost laughed. "What if it doesn't?" Marissa's silence answered. Home. Lorna grew quieter. She moved more slowly, sat longer at the table without eating. One afternoon, Aisha found her staring at the eviction notice like it had learned a new language. "You okay?" Aisha asked. I'm tired, Lorna said. That's all. But that night Lorna's chest tightened, breath shallow and fast. The ambulance lights painted the apartment blue and red. Aisha rode in the back, gripping the rail, listening to the medic count breaths like a metronome. At the hospital, a nurse asked for insurance. Aisha handed over a card and felt the weight of every unpaid bill press closer. Lorna squeezed her hand. This isn't your fault. Aisha swallowed. I know. I didn't. The story kept moving without them. Maya sent updates in careful bursts. More calls coming in. Former intake clerk wants to talk. Pressure building. Caldwell went on television again, face taut. We regret the distress, he said. But our policies exist for a reason. Aisha watched from the plastic chair by Lorna's bed. The caption beneath his face read housing official response. No mention of names. No mention of patterns. Her phone buzzed with a message from HR. We need to discuss reputational concerns. She typed back. My mother is hospitalized. The reply came an hour later. We hope she recovers quickly. At 3 a.m, an email arrived from an address she didn't recognize. I worked there. What they did to you, they did to others. The sender signed only R. Aisha stared at the screen, heart racing. She forwarded it to Maya with a single line. Is this real? Maya replied almost instantly. And they're scared. The next day, the woman with the clipboard, Helen Brooks, sat in Aisha's living room, hands folded, voice steady. I heard him, Helen said. The words. The way he said them like it was settled. Why didn't you say something then? Aisha asked, not accusing, just tired. Helen looked down. Because I needed that office. Because I didn't want to be next. Aisha nodded. I understand. Helen went on record. So did R, whose real name turned out to be Renee Alvarez, a former intake clerk who described a quiet shorthand used behind closed doors. Low risk. Better fit elsewhere. Appropriate. The phrase took on a new shape in print. Not a single insult but a tool. The backlash sharpened. A radio caller sneered. Why make it about race? Aisha answered when she could. Because the pattern makes it about race. Someone posted her address online. Jules stayed over, sleeping on the couch with a baseball bat propped nearby. This is what they do, Jules said. They make it expensive to be right. One afternoon, as Aisha stepped outside for air, a man approached, phone raised. Say it again, he said. Say you're a victim. Aisha kept walking. Her legs shook when she reached the corner. At the hospital, Lorna improved, then stalled. The doctor spoke gently about stress, about rest, about things Aisha couldn't schedule. Aisha sat by the bed, reading comments she shouldn't read, deleting messages she couldn't answer. Maya called late. The authorities board is meeting, she said. Closed session. Aisha closed her eyes. About me. About them, Maya corrected. And now about consequences. A letter arrived the next morning, hand-delivered, bearing the city seal. Notice of review. No apology. No admission. But it was something solid, something that moved. Aisha held it, feeling its weight. She thought of the cost, the nights, the fear, the hospital bed, the job on pause. She thought of the voices stacking, the pattern refusing to stay hidden. Lorna squeezed her hand. You didn't choose this, she said. But you're carrying it. Aisha nodded, tears finally breaking through. I just wanted a place to live. Lorna smiled weakly. And now you're changing the rules. Outside, the city kept talking, arguing, denying, listening. Aisha breathed in the noise, knowing it would take more from her before it gave anything back. She didn't know how much she could afford to lose. She only knew she couldn't afford to stop. The first spreadsheet arrived at dawn. Maya sent it without commentary, just a file and a single line. This is what they didn't want visible. Aisha opened it at the kitchen table while Lorna slept in the next room, oxygen machine whispering like a careful secret. Rows and columns filled the screen. Addresses, dates, outcomes. The same phrases appeared in the notes field, copied and pasted until they lost pretense. Not a fit. Risk flagged. More appropriate alternatives available. Aisha scrolled until her eyes burned. The denials clustered in familiar neighborhoods. The approvals spread outward, lighter, freer. No names were highlighted. None needed to be. By noon 3 more files arrived. One from Renee, documenting intake quotas that were never written down. One from Helen, recalling meetings where language was rehearsed like choreography. One from a community advocate who'd been collecting stories quietly for years, waiting for a moment when they would be believed. Maya called. "This isn't anecdotal anymore," she said. "It's structural." At 2, a press briefing was announced. Independent Review Commission to examine housing authority practices. The city seal flashed on the screen again, heavier this time. The mayor spoke about trust, about transparency, about learning. Caldwell wasn't there. Aisha watched from the couch, Jules beside her, remote clutched like a shield. "They're building distance," Jules said. "Watch who disappears first." The phone buzzed with a voicemail from Patricia Lowell. Aisha didn't listen to it right away. She let it sit, letting the fact of it matter more than the words. That afternoon, a man in a blazer knocked on the door. He introduced himself as Thomas Reed, counsel for the Review Commission. He asked to come in. He listened carefully as Aisha spoke, taking notes without interruption. "Do you still have the original recording?" he asked. "Yes," Aisha said. "And the call logs?" "Good," Reed said. "Context matters." "So does pattern," Aisha replied. Reed nodded. "Exactly." At the hospital, Lorna watched the coverage from her bed, eyes sharp despite the fatigue. "They're saying the right words now," she said. "That's how you know they're scared." Aisha smiled faintly. "Or careful." "They've always been careful," Lorna said. "Just not with us." That evening, the woman from the audience, Helen, appeared on camera, face calm, voice steady. "I was there," she said. "I heard the language. It wasn't about availability. It was about sorting." The anchor leaned in. "Sorting how?" Helen didn't hesitate. "By who they thought belonged." The comments exploded. The phrase belongs trended, dragged into arguments that tried to sand it smooth. Aisha read fewer of them now. She learned which voices mattered by how quietly they spoke. A call came in from the clinic's board chair. "We're reviewing your status," he said. "There's pressure." "From who?" Aisha asked. "From donors. From the city. From people who don't like uncertainty." Aisha closed her eyes. "Neither do I." The call ended without promises. Late that night, Aisha finally listened to Lowell's voicemail. Her voice was tight, careful. "We're willing to discuss resolution," she said. Privately, Aisha forwarded it to Maya with 2 words. "No silence." Maya replied with a thumbs up and a link. "Renee's affidavit is live." The affidavit read like a map of a hidden room. Quotas described without numbers. Meetings where managers nodded without speaking. A list of phrases flagged as safe. Caldwell's name appeared twice, both times attached to directives that avoided instruction while making intent clear. Aisha felt a tremor pass through her. Not fear this time but recognition. This was the thing behind the thing. The reason policy sounded the way it did. At dawn, the mayor announced temporary leadership changes. Caldwell was placed on leave pending review. The phrasing was cautious, reversible. Still, Aisha felt the ground shift. Jules hugged her. "That's a crack." Aisha nodded. "Cracks let light in." The review commission requested a public hearing. At the hospital, Lorna squeezed Aisha's hand. "Promise me something," she said. "What?" "Don't let them trade justice for quiet." Aisha met her eyes. "I won't." Outside, the city argued itself hoarse. Inside, documents stacked, voices aligned, patterns sharpened. What had begun as a single sentence now stood as evidence with edges. Aisha understood finally what it meant to be believed. Not as a favor, not as an exception, but as a fact that changed how power moved. She felt the cost still, heavy and unpaid. But she also felt the structure tremble. And this time, it wasn't her standing alone in the hallway. The room smelled of polished wood and anxiety. A long, curved table held 12 chairs, but the audience had multiplied, spilling into the gallery. Cameras glinted, microphones leaned forward, and Aisha sat near the center, hands clasped in her lap, heart hammering. She wasn't alone. Renee and Helen flanked her, each a quiet anchor in the storm. The hearing began with procedural formalities, names read aloud, case numbers assigned. The chairperson, a woman with sharp eyes and a sharper tone, called for opening statements. Caldwell's attorney spoke first, voice smooth, rehearsed. We assert that all actions were consistent with written policy and long-standing procedure. Aisha felt her stomach tighten. Written policy. The words had been thrown at her so many times before, neat shields against challenge. She reminded herself of the recordings, the spreadsheets, the testimonies lining up like dominoes. When it was her turn, she stood. Every eye in the room seemed to pivot toward her, but she felt grounded by the presence of Renee and Helen. I want to tell the truth, Aisha began, voice steady despite the quiver beneath. Not about interpretation, not about intent. About what happened, and what it means when policy is used to silence people like me. Caldwell sat across the table, expression impassive. He adjusted his tie, leaned back, as if the room were a stage and he merely an observer. Aisha continued, narrating the meeting in the hallway, the denial, the words more appropriate. She played the recording quietly on her phone, letting the room hear the tone that had haunted her. The microphone amplified it without embellishment. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Journalists scribbled. Officials shifted uncomfortably. The phrase that had once felt like a closed door now echoed like a call to action. You should try somewhere more appropriate. When Renee's affidavit was read aloud, detailing systemic patterns, the weight of the evidence pressed on Caldwell's composure. His jaw tightened. Aisha noticed the subtle twitch in his hand, the way his fingers tapped the table. Small cracks in a carefully constructed facade. Helen spoke last, recounting her silence in the hall, the fear that had kept her from intervening. Her voice didn't waver. I saw it, she said. I heard it. And for years I said nothing because I was afraid. Today I am not afraid. The room went quiet, the kind of silence that thrums with recognition. The commission chairwoman leaned forward. Caldwell, do you wish to respond? He rose slowly, clearing his throat. The policies are in place to protect the integrity of the system, he said. Any perception otherwise is unfortunate, but the procedures were followed. I deny any intent to discriminate. Intent. Aisha felt the word like a blade. But intent didn't erase outcome. Patterns didn't care about perception. The commissioners asked questions about past decisions, training protocols, and how staff interpreted risk and fit. With each answer, Caldwell's sentences grew clipped, defensive. The cross-examination highlighted inconsistencies between his statements and the documents, the recordings, the affidavits. Outside, the gallery murmured. Journalists whispered to one another. Live feeds showing captions like pattern of denials confirmed and officials face scrutiny. Aisha could feel the shift, subtle but undeniable, like wind bending the trees before a storm breaks. At one point, Caldwell's attorney tried to redirect, emphasizing policy manuals and procedural compliance. The chairwoman cut him off sharply. Procedures are meaningless if they perpetuate harm, she said. Aisha's throat tightened. Harm. That word finally named what she had carried alone. She glanced at Renee and Helen. Their nods were small but enough. Enough to remind her that truth wasn't solitary. It was shared. The questioning concluded, and the commissioners deliberated in closed session. The audience filed out slowly, whispers floating through the room like smoke. Aisha remained seated, taking in the quiet, knowing the hearing's gravity would linger beyond the walls. Later, Maya approached with her camera, notebook tucked under her arm. "You did what needed to be done," she said softly. "It's on record. It can't be unseen." Aisha nodded. "It's not over yet," she said. "But it's the first time I feel seen." Outside, the city had shifted. The news reported the hearing as it unfolded, emphasizing evidence, testimony, and the systemic nature of the issues. Social media exploded with clips, posts, and conversations. Support surged. Critics countered. The debate was no longer abstract. It had faces, names, voices that could no longer be ignored. That evening, Aisha returned home to Lorna, who had spent the day monitoring updates. She hugged her tightly. "You stood," Lorna said. "You didn't flinch." "I couldn't," Aisha replied. "Not when all of them were counting on silence." In the small apartment, surrounded by spreadsheets, recordings, and the hum of exhausted city life, Aisha felt the weight of what had been accomplished. But she also felt the cost: the nights spent awake, the stress etched into her mother's health, the whispers that followed her in the streets. Justice was moving, but it demanded vigilance, endurance, and courage. And in that quiet, fragile space, Aisha realized that standing on the record wasn't victory. It was a commitment. To truth, to those silenced before her, and to herself. Tomorrow, the commissioners would issue recommendations. But tonight, Aisha let herself breathe, for the first time in weeks, knowing she had taken the first irrevocable step toward accountability. Outside, the city's lights flickered and cars hummed past. Somewhere, voices argued, debated, and noticed. The pattern was exposed. The system had begun to respond. And Aisha, though weary, understood the magnitude of what it meant to speak, to bear witness, and to insist that policy never again be used as a shield for injustice. The morning of the ruling dawned pale and hesitant, like the city itself was holding its breath. Aisha sat at the kitchen table, hands folded over a mug of untouched coffee, listening to the low hum of the refrigerator and the faint murmur of distant traffic. The apartment felt different, charged, expectant, quiet in the way a theater waits for the curtain to rise. The phone rang before the news alerts reached her. It was Maya. "They're posting it," Maya said. Her voice held a mix of relief and disbelief. "Commission's decision is live." Aisha's stomach flipped as she pulled up the official statement on the Housing Authority's website. Bolded at the top, "Findings of the Independent Review Commission." She scrolled carefully, aware that each word carried weight. The statement was unequivocal. Caldwell and several senior officials were found to have engaged in practices that disproportionately disadvantaged certain applicants. Specific phrases, risk flagged, more appropriate alternatives, were called out as coded language systematically used to exclude. The Commission recommended disciplinary action, mandatory retraining, and policy revision. Aisha leaned back in her chair, letting the news settle like snow in the room. Her phone buzzed with alerts. News channels, social media, colleagues, strangers, everyone who had followed her story. Some messages were congratulations, others warnings, and a few thinly veiled threats. Lorna stirred from her chair by the window, where she'd been watching the city begin its day. "It's done?" she asked, voice careful, almost disbelieving. "Yes," Aisha said, the word light but fragile. She reached across the table and took her mother's hand. "They're being held accountable." Lorna squeezed her fingers. "You did this." Aisha shook her head. "We did this." She thought of Renee and Helen, of Maya, of Jules, and of everyone who had stayed quiet too long. The ruling was theirs as much as hers. That afternoon, a news conference unfolded outside City Hall. Reporters pressed microphones toward the podium, cameras focused like hawks. Caldwell appeared in a navy suit, expression strained, eyes darting. He read a brief statement acknowledging unintended outcomes and promising cooperation with policy reforms. There was no defiance, only the tight precision of someone who understood the consequences of exposure. The reporters asked questions about resignations, accountability, and retraining. Caldwell deflected with careful phrasing. But the commission's report had been public for hours. His words were defensive against an evidence-backed tide. At the clinic, HR lifted Aisha's administrative leave. Marissa approached, cautious yet sincere. "You're cleared to return," she said. "We support your right to advocacy, but we also want to rebuild trust internally." Aisha nodded, recognizing the tension beneath the words. Advocacy had a cost, and rebuilding trust didn't erase it. That evening, she returned home to Lorna, who had prepared a modest dinner despite exhaustion. They ate in silence at first, the weight of the past weeks hanging between them like smoke. "Did you think it would come to this?" Lorna asked softly. "No," Aisha admitted. "I thought it might blow over, that policy would shield them, that they could dismiss it all." Lorna shook her head. "But it didn't. And it can't anymore." The apartment was quiet after dinner. Aisha turned on her laptop and checked the latest social media responses. Stories of other applicants came forward, emboldened by the ruling. Conversations about systemic inequity spread into forums, blogs, and comment threads that had previously dismissed complaints as isolated incidents. Aisha thought of the cost. The nights she had lain awake, listening for whispers or footsteps. The fear in her mother's eyes. The strain on her job. The moments when she had doubted herself, questioning whether the fight was worth it. Yet, even with the ruling, she recognized the emotional toll wasn't something a report could fix. Trauma lingered like a shadow, reminding her that victory in the public eye didn't erase personal scars. Late that night, she replayed the original recording one final time. Caldwell's words, once small and suffocating, now felt exposed, diminished under the weight of evidence and testimony. She pressed pause and placed the phone face down, red light blinking absent. Lorna rested her head on Aisha's shoulder. "Will it change?" she whispered. "Some things," Aisha said. "Some things will. And some things will carry forward." The following week brought concrete changes. Caldwell resigned. Other officials were reassigned or suspended pending retraining. Policy manuals were rewritten, emphasizing transparency, equity, and oversight. The Housing Authority announced a public review process, including community voices in shaping future procedures. Aisha visited the office to submit her updated housing application. The desk clerk greeted her politely, the words neutral but not coded. The office smelled of fresh paint, the walls unmarked by the subtle messages that had haunted her weeks ago. She left the folder with a sense of cautious hope. Outside, the city moved on. Cars hummed, buses rumbled, voices argued and laughed. But somewhere in the rhythm of the streets, the shift was real. Policies no longer protected silence. Patterns no longer hid in plain sight. And one voice, Aisha's, had helped expose them. That night, she and Lorna stood by the window, watching lights flicker in distant apartments. Aisha thought of the work that remained. Healing, advocacy, ensuring accountability, but allowed herself a moment of quiet pride. "Tomorrow," Lorna said, "we start over." Aisha smiled faintly. "Tomorrow," she agreed. But she knew that even with justice served, the memory of fear and the cost of speaking out would linger, a reminder of both resilience and vulnerability. She turned off the lamp, letting the room sink into darkness, the city outside alive with possibility. And for the first time in weeks, Aisha felt a fragile sense of peace, knowing that though the battle had been hard, it had mattered, and that truth, once spoken, could no longer be ignored. The morning after the ruling, the city seemed to hum differently. Even the air felt heavier with possibility, as if acknowledgement had given it shape. Aisha sat at her kitchen table, scrolling through the headlines on her phone. Housing Authority faces overhaul after discrimination findings. Citizen recording exposes systemic bias. Patterns of denial revealed in municipal offices. Each title felt like a small victory, yet each comment section reminded her that the battle for perception wasn't over. "Mom," Aisha said, sipping lukewarm coffee. "Look at this." Lorna leaned over, eyes scanning the headlines. "It's everywhere," she murmured. "They can't ignore it now." They might try, Aisha said, frowning. But at least it's public. At least it can't be erased. By mid-morning, reporters were calling again, asking for updates and reflections. Maya guided her through each response. Be firm, she advised. Be factual. Don't let them twist emotion into vulnerability. Aisha had learned to filter the noise. She answered questions carefully, emphasizing patterns, policy misuse, and systemic responsibility. She refused to speak for emotion alone. She let evidence do the work. Meanwhile, within her own life, the cost lingered. The clinic board held a meeting regarding her advocacy. Some colleagues whispered, others expressed support. Marissa, HR, and the director expressed formal approval while subtly reminding her of professional boundaries. Aisha nodded, recognizing the fine line she now walked between citizen and employee, activist and professional. Outside her apartment, neighbors approached differently. Some offered congratulations, cautious and sincere. Others lingered, staring, whispering, as if proximity carried judgment. Aisha noticed their hesitance, realizing that public acknowledgement didn't erase private prejudice. Late that afternoon, a formal city press conference convened. The mayor, flanked by new leadership in the housing authority, outlined immediate reforms. Mandatory transparency, complaint auditing, community oversight committees, and a hotline to report suspected discrimination. Each measure felt like a small shield built from months of struggle. Caldwell's resignation was mentioned briefly. His statement framed as procedural. He had been removed from power, yet the headlines noted his calm composure and assertion that no intent to discriminate existed. Aisha felt a pang, not for him but for the system that allowed people to hide behind intent while harming lives. That evening, Renee and Helen visited Aisha and Lorna. They brought food, laughter, and validation. They had been through the process in parallel, sharing stories, corroborating details, and now witnessing consequences. Their presence reminded Aisha that she had not carried the burden alone. I still can't believe we did this, Renee said quietly. I thought staying silent was safer. Helen nodded. It wasn't. Silence doesn't protect you. It protects them. Aisha smiled, tired but steady. It feels different now, seeing change happen. The conversation drifted toward other applicants, communities affected, and ways to ensure oversight. Ideas for workshops, reporting mechanisms, and advocacy networks emerged organically. Aisha realized the fight wasn't merely about her own denial. It was about dismantling structures that had remained hidden too long. By nightfall, Aisha sat alone in the living room, scrolling through updates. Supporters praised her bravery. Critics questioned motives. Emails arrived from former applicants seeking guidance. Some timid, others urgent. She read each carefully, responding thoughtfully, aware that every word mattered. Her phone rang. It was Maya. They're finally implementing the first policy changes, Maya said. Training schedules. Public reporting. The hotline. The system is moving. Aisha exhaled. It's slower than it should be, but at least it's moving. Maya hesitated. People are paying attention. They're watching now. The precedent matters. Aisha looked out the window. Streetlights flickered, reflecting on the wet pavement from an earlier drizzle. Yes, she said softly. The precedent matters. Hours later, Lorna appeared, wrapping a blanket around her daughter's shoulders. You've done more than fight, she said. You've created space for others to fight too. Aisha rested her head against her mother's shoulder. I just followed the truth, she murmured. It's bigger than me now. The apartment was quiet. The city outside pulsed with movement, lights flickering, buses rolling, voices carrying into the night. The struggle had begun in a single hallway, escalated through a recording, and rippled outward until it touched policy, leadership, and public consciousness. Aisha pressed pause on the phone, letting silence fill the room. It was not the silence of fear, but of reflection. She thought of the nights she had lain awake, the hospital trips, the whispers, and the moments of doubt. Each was a reminder of the cost of speaking truth to power. Yet, even as the cost lingered, so did the impact. The housing authorities' reforms were the first tangible result. Other offices were reviewing practices. Applicants who had once been quietly denied now had a voice. The public conversation had shifted. Language, intent, and systemic bias were no longer invisible. Aisha glanced at the framed certificate on her wall, a memento from her clinic, ordinary and official. She thought about how power had tried to define her place, how the system had attempted to silence her. And she realized that speaking, documenting, and persisting had not only revealed injustice, but had begun to change it. She stood, moving to the window, looking out over the cityscape. Lights shimmered on wet streets. People walked, argued, laughed, and argued again. The system was imperfect, the world still flawed, but her actions had carved space for accountability. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to breathe fully. The ripples from the hallway had grown into waves. And though the water would continue to move, she knew she had left her mark, steady and undeniable. Tomorrow, she would return to her housing application, to her job, to the work of life. But tonight, she let the reverberations settle, knowing that some fights, not all but some, had lasting consequences. And for Aisha Turner that was enough. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of rain-soaked asphalt and blooming early spring flowers. Aisha stepped onto the sidewalk, jacket pulled tight, phone tucked in her pocket. The city was awake, humming with the ordinary rhythm of lives continuing. Buses clattered, tires hissed over puddles, voices carried from open windows. But for Aisha, everything felt transformed. Today was different. Today, she would enter the housing office again, not as an applicant at the mercy of policy, but as someone who had exposed its flaws. The weight of weeks past still pressed on her, but it no longer felt suffocating. Instead, it grounded her. She walked with intention, heels clicking against wet concrete, each step a silent assertion. The office lobby smelled faintly of coffee and air freshener. A receptionist glanced up, smile polite but wary. Aisha handed over her updated application. There was no hesitation, no whispered warnings. Just the routine of process finally meeting transparency. "Everything seems in order," the receptionist said, scanning the papers. "Your case will be processed normally." Aisha's chest lifted. "Thank you." The words felt small for all they carried, but they mattered. Outside, reporters still lingered, cameras focused, but this time they weren't chasing scandal. They were capturing change. Aisha felt their eyes but did not flinch. She had learned to occupy space without apology, to let truth be her shield. Back at the apartment, Lorna was waiting with a mug of tea. She handed it over wordlessly, the gesture itself a comfort and a reminder of the cost they had endured together. "You're nervous," Lorna said, observing the faint tremor in Aisha's fingers. "Excited," Aisha corrected. "Nervous implies doubt." Lorna smiled. "Good. Excitement means hope." They sat together, sipping tea, watching the city awaken in full sunlight. The world was the same and entirely different. Ordinary routines overlaid by the extraordinary reality that justice, once sought, could ripple outward. Maya called. "They're finalizing policy revisions," she said. "Staff training, new complaint procedures, public oversight boards. The reforms will be permanent." Aisha exhaled. "Permanent. I can hear it." Maya chuckled softly. "That's the sound of accountability." By midday, Aisha met with Renee and Helen. They walked the streets together, talking quietly about the weeks past, the hearings, the testimonies, and the unexpected weight of exposure. There were stories of fear, yes, but also of courage. Colleagues coming forward, former applicants speaking publicly, patterns recognized and challenged. "Do you think it will hold?" Helen asked, her voice cautious. "It has to," Aisha said. "Not because it's guaranteed, but because we've made it visible. Transparency is its own pressure." Renee nodded. "It's strange," she said. "Being part of something bigger than yourself. Seeing your voice become part of change." Aisha smiled. It's the only reason to keep going. That evening, she returned home to find a letter from the housing authority. It confirmed that her application had been approved. The words blurred at first, heavy with relief, exhaustion, and disbelief. Home. Not just a space, but validation, proof that persistence and courage could bend systems designed to exclude. She sat on the couch with Lorna, holding the letter between them. Tears came unbidden, not only for joy, but for the accumulated stress, fear, and loss. "We're safe," Lorna whispered, voice breaking. "No," Aisha said softly. "We're seen." The difference mattered. Safety could be temporary, fragile. Being seen, acknowledged by both community and system, was enduring. Night fell, and the city lights flickered on one by one, painting streets with gold and white. Aisha stepped onto the balcony, inhaling the cool air, watching the buildings glow against the darkening sky. Each apartment held stories, some still unseen, some still struggling, but tonight her story had a place firmly established. She thought of the women who had remained silent in the hallways, the friends who had guided her, the reporters who had amplified truth. She thought of the red blinking light on her phone months ago, recording words meant to dismiss her. That moment had sparked everything. A single, small act had grown into a wave of accountability that even she hadn't fully anticipated. Her phone buzzed. Maya texting again. Community forums are active. People are sharing. Policy discussions ongoing. The momentum is real. Aisha smiled, fingers brushing the railing. "Momentum," she murmured. The word felt tangible, heavy with possibility. Later, Lorna joined her on the balcony, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. They stood together, silent, letting the city's rhythm fill the space between words. "I'm proud of you," Lorna said finally. Aisha leaned her head against her mother's shoulder. "I'm proud of us," she replied. "We did this together." They watched as the city slept and awoke simultaneously, as ordinary and extraordinary lives intertwined. In the distance, the glow of streetlights hinted at both routine and potential, at the countless small battles quietly unfolding across neighborhoods. Aisha knew her fight had been one among many, but it had made a difference. Tomorrow, she would unpack boxes, arrange furniture, begin routines inside a home that bore the mark of both struggle and triumph. But tonight, she simply breathed, letting the stillness wrap around her like a warm, protective cloak. The red blinking light on her phone, once a harbinger of fear, was now gone. In its place was a quiet knowledge. Her voice mattered, her persistence mattered, and the truth she had spoken had changed the world around her. A new dawn stretched over the city, spilling sunlight across streets, buildings, and hearts. And for the first time in weeks, Aisha Turner allowed herself to feel entirely, irrevocably at peace. She closed her eyes and whispered to the city, "We see you, and we will not be ignored."